Welcome back to the Trees and Lines podcast. In this second part of our interview with Dr. Anand Persad, we discuss climate resilient programs, international efforts in vegetation management, and the importance of biodiversity in the industry. Have a listen. Hope you enjoy.
Did you guys get connected through, hey, there's only 5 people in this industry that have a PhD, let's have a cocktail party? Or was it through research? Like, how did you guys get connected? Or was it through some of Phil's philanthropic work in Belize?
Phil's been a mentor for me coming out of grad school and new in the industry. Interacting with Phil at the UAA was I guess my first interaction with Phil, but knowing his background as well. And Phil, feel free to chime in.
I guess we bumped into each other conference after conference. Both of us were oftentimes speakers and
Got it.
Just known each other for years.
Okay.
Know him better now after last
After
week or a week
yeah.
or so ago.
What is something that you're working on right now that you're super excited about?
We're looking at climate resilient programs. Everyone's talking about climate ready, climate resilient, So when we look at climate action, which is what I like to call it, climate action work really revolves. It's a global phenomenon. Climate is global. And our perspectives, even here in North America, can benefit from the stories in frontline areas. And I've been telling that story for the past 3 years at conferences, ranging from Sweden to New Mexico. I've been telling the story of what is going on globally. And to help that along, there's been an informal alliance of people, research sites, governments, and I loosely call it the ITPI, or International Tree Performance Initiative, which basically helps people define what am I looking for in the performance of my space, my green space. So it's miles beyond landscaping. It's miles beyond it. It takes risk elements, perform the human initiative, and brings the human initiative into core focus, along with the green elements as well. And I'm excited about that. And that's kind of what took me to Belize with Phil, that looking at the human interaction with green and, mitigating for disasters and so forth.
So the Belize project, truly an international effort. So Anand went down, collected data, a group out of Sweden, you can tell us more about that, put together a planting plan. A group out of the States, our industry, went down and helped start developing that. And then Anand's planning on taking it worldwide. So that was a high-end recap. Anand, why don't you tell us the details?
Yeah, and Phil mentioned worldwide. So, for example, in Jaipur, my great-grandfather came out of a village there, and I was fortunate to visit that village this year rather, this summer, and worked with the villagers there. They've been planting trees for hundreds of years, and we talk about tree plantings in Chicago, Baltimore, Washington, D.C. We talk about tree plantings in North America, and we focus on street trees, we focus on park trees, we focus on rigid, formal planting programs. Tree planting's been going on all over the world, and there are lessons and when this brings in the cultural part, right? So there are tree planting going on in semi-arid regions of Rajasthan, for example, where they're strapped for water. But there are certain species that grow there, so the villagers have identified these species, hence the tree performance, right? They have identified that these species do well in a dry environment, and they're planting these species, and they've done their tree selection. So when we look at tree selection criteria and we look at the formal numerics and the tenets behind our planting here, it's been done. It's going on somewhere else in a different way, but but effective. They're realizing canopies there, and that's what brings the global village together, right? Everybody wants some sort of environmental component to their daily lives.
Who do you think globally is not just prioritizing it, but making the most headway in terms of a holistic approach to what you just mentioned?
Yeah, I see the folks in Europe. They've been for some time now being the innovators in some spaces, and they are and they've been looking at things a little bit before us in terms of smart planting and smart planting technology. And I've interacted with folks in Sweden, folks in Italy, and so forth. And their questions have been a good mix of academic and a good mix of industry coming together. And I think that while they have good collaboration there are lessons that they are learning, for example, in coastal areas from other parts of the world that they are also incorporating. And I see the in Europe, they do reach out a lot to the frontline areas in the Pacific. I run into a lot of researchers from Europe in the Pacific and the Caribbean when I'm out there, and more so than in North America, because they understand that, hey, we can take lessons from here back. So I think that's happening, and and it's feathering out into North America now too. So hopefully, but then we can't leave the Caribbean, CARICOM nations and so forth. So the opportunity here is a lot of these folks have the ability to actually leapfrog and bring their programs up because they are there in these fast changing frontline areas. So they can bring their program just as equal to the ones in Europe, and which is where, this is why I like the ITPI, because it can do that. It can be a spaceship to sort of transfer the nuggets back and forth.
And you're not talking just vegetation for climate purposes, right? A lot of what we talk about is the other benefits.
Yeah, habitat, biodiversity, there's big emphasis on biodiversity worldwide, and on how biodiverse do we have to be able to survive in the future. Do we need to get back to what it was 80 years ago, 100 years ago? Do we need to have a resilient plan that, hey, this is what we want to see and this is what we want to realize, and the latter is what's coming up more and more when we talk about rewilding, and when we talk about creating habitat for an ecosystem approach. More and more and more we are part of that ecosystem, right? So our cropped lawns and so forth are gradually giving way to more grow out areas, pollinator beds and so forth here in North America. But this is something that we see in the island nations and in frontline areas where they don't have as many acres of cruise crop lawns, or they've been doing that forever. It seems they've been planting edible. We are looking at edible fruit, edible spaces in our ornamental world, and edible crops and so forth. And they've been doing that, all along. They plant a tree to get shade, but maybe some fruit as well in some of the global areas. And that's something that we can learn from. And in fact, that's some of the stories that we're taking from the Pacific areas back to Sweden as well.
In Europe, is some of the progress a function of like support from governments and coalitions, or is a lot of these initiatives supported by the utility?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and it's really community based. Call to action from people who are in touch with their, and who are in some ways influential on their local media, etc. It's hugely important. So in Europe, you find the model of the community being very powerful, community based organizations having impetus and reaching the political arena very quickly. There's a mechanism for that. I see a whole lot more than in some other areas of the world where the communities are, have a long winding road ahead of them to realize some initiative. I see, and that's one. I think that's changing now. I think the politicians the world over are realizing, and I see more of them. I've been invited to some forums whereby, hey, can we have you speak on the green plan? Can we have you attach? Can we help you? Can we help you attach some policy to this decision making process? So it's happening in other areas, but they are ahead when it comes to that community base. And that's some of what we need here. We need to listen to the communities. And I think the utilities in North America are doing that really well because, they are listening to the neighbors, they're listening to the landholders, the folks who, the metro parks, the Audubon groups, the eco-sensitive agencies, and so forth, the U.S. Forest Service, etc., that own land that abut to the right of ways. They're working more and more in tandem than they would, the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, etc. We see that interaction with the utilities, a whole lot more. So that's a good sign, right?
That is a really good sign. Yeah, that's awesome. Wow. Okay.
So, how are you using technology in your research? We've seen so much change in recent years. What's available to us? So, what are you doing?
Yeah, I think we are seeing the use of um, of technology to get to data faster, and what we do with the data is really divergent. We can have 100 people look at the same data set and come up with 100 interpretations, and the challenge is really, for me personally, is getting that artificial intelligent product that's human infused. And this is something that I spoke about in Albuquerque, New Mexico, about using artificial intelligence in literally a smart way, in a way that we can. And that's the thing about technology, is we can't just jump on the bandwagon because it's all new and it's glossy and it looks good and it gives us the results faster. We want to have that interpretation that is meaningful and can raise, realize what I call a good EROI, or economic return on investment, but also an ecological return on investment. So technology, and we are building satellites, as a core industry offering. We look at LiDAR. We are looking at the way in which we can work smarter and not harder, maybe put less people physically on the right of way. But these are things that we do need to realize needs a balance. So we are never going to, I think, lose the need for classically trained arborists or foresters. This is something that we're going to have
It's
to
a
realize.
tool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a tool, and we're going to need to make sure we have that human hybrid and that human input in there at all times.
Dr. Prasad, since you're doing so many things, right? What do you think you're most known for in the industry?
Taj, that's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that, so I'm here.
Yeah.
I mean,
You're
I'll
like
have to
part.
answer
You're
it.
like, we'll discuss this in part three.
Yeah, part three.
Yeah.
No, but I see myself. I've been elected to some roles along the way. So I've been president of the Arboricultural Research Education Academy at ISA. I've been chair of the UA Research Academy. I've been Research Association. And I currently chair the ISA Science Research Committee. But I see these roles as being connected. I see myself as a connector, coming from the Caribbean and coming from a very connected place, right? Growing up on an island, you are connected, brother. You
Oh
know
yeah.
everybody
Oh
and
yeah.
everybody,
For sure.
and
Yeah.
who you don't know knows you or know your parents. So
Yeah.
you grow up
Yeah.
knowing, knowing
Yeah.
that connection and connectivity and networking. So when I tell people loosely, I know about 200 urban foresters, that I can call in the North America, and I have about 2,000 people that I know in the business. And I mean, these are people that I can call by the first name, and and they're, some of them in leadership, some of it. But knowing from boots to, like, from the boots to the C-suite is important for me. And mixing and being able to network, I think is and I look for the products of the work I do to deliver on that premise, that it could at some point, whether it's safety, it shouldn't be just keeping workers safe. It should be the C-suite recognizing that this is a policy we need to implement. So being able to traverse, spherically, I think is important to me, and I hope that at the end of the day, that's what I'm known for, as a connector.
Also think of you in relation to Biomechanics Week. Biomechanics has been an area you've been focused on.
Yeah, yeah. So this started in Ohio by a group of folks with the ISA and the Ohio Independent Arborists Association got together, and this started, and I helped in the group, and then it's mushroomed into during the pandemic. People couldn't travel, so tree biomechanics, became a question. Can we do it? Can we do it internationally? Can we look at it without people, having to necessarily travel to one location? Can we do it locally? And that's what, one of the things that I look at is influencing research groups internationally to start looking at, their own risk and their own, how their trees are behaving on the loads and so forth.
Yeah, when you mentioned your linkage with safety to the C-suite, I think about the work you've been pushing to, link it throughout the world, but local level research. I think that's really intriguing.
I don't know if you mentioned this already, but where did you grow up in the
In
Caribbean?
the South Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago.
You're in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah.
And do you still have family there?
Yes.
Is it, yeah? Are
Yeah.
you,
Yeah. Back in a few weeks, I'll be there for Christmas. Yeah.
and are you pretty, you mentioned island culture. Are you pretty plugged into the decision makers on the island, which allows you to do the work that you're doing here in North America and the rest of the world? Has that allowed you to use the island as also an incubator of testing out things and, trying to contribute to the Caribbean?
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of the work started there actually. The need to take, information, the need to borrow information from there as well, has been foremost, I think. And they, the one of the first ITPI sites I was thinking about doing it, looking at performance of green spaces was in Trinidad and Tobago. The good news there is that I do have the support from the community to the government. So I've been working with the government there at the highest levels to exact programs, and they have some very historical places. They have some parks that go back 200 years there, and that's been it's been a breath of fresh air, I think, when you have that openness. So being able to work around the world but then go back home with the same messages, for me, it's a good piece of the legacy I want to build.
Yeah. And has your work in Trinidad, Tobago, Belize, has that made it easier for you to work in other Caribbean countries, or every country it has its own complications and it hasn't translated as easily?
Well, you learn lessons. You learn lessons, right? And at the end of the day, people are all the same. And whether you're in Europe or you're in the Pacific Island or WAB, people want what's best for themselves and what's best for their kids. Everybody at the end of the day, and you find that threaded throughout is again, I want to get back to the connected piece, is that they read a lot about what's going on elsewhere, and then they know a lot of folks when they realize how good a job they are doing, right? And that's one of the things that I try to bring to the table as a connector. You're doing a really good job here. You want to do so and so, or maybe you want to do more of this and less of that. And that's always the power of positive thinking, right? And helping community. So I help the communities learn from others, and I help them, even within themselves, take their game to the next level. So there are lessons everywhere, I like to say, Taj.
Are you mentoring some other researchers, like PhDs? Like, are there other Dr. Prasads in the pipeline that are coming up that will be able to kind of build on your work?
Well, I would. Well, yeah, there are several students here. There's students. I'm at here at UF right now, and we have PhD. We have a couple of PhD students I'm helping mentor, and I've mentored several in the past. So I do maintain, connectivity with the academic world and recent PhDs and people in postdocs, and I've been, able to do some symposium at some graduate schools, and that helps.
What I found interesting about this conversation and where I think it can continue to go is you touch a lot of different things. Your perspective is quite unique. You are very unique in the fact that you're practitioner slash researcher. You're not just one. My engagement with often just researchers are how disconnected they can be from the practical realities, and it's like, hey, great idea. I'll see you in 15 years when this can actually be implemented, right? So I do think you're very unique in that way. So I love the fact that you're doing this work and drawing from different parts of the world, not being from this industry, or growing up in this industry. I think getting a diverse lens with people that are leading ideas in Europe and Asia and the Caribbean, and reincorporating that back into North America is very, very important. Um, because, like, as you go from west to east, it's like every state is its own little country with its own set of problems, right? So like there could be a state in the US that needs to completely talk to the Caribbean, and that's where their focus should be versus,
Well,
you
you
know,
think about it, Ted, is there's a lot of North American utilities down in South America, for example. I was in Colombia, and no names called, but there are trucks there from utilities that are in the Midwest that are down in Colombia doing infrastructure work there on contract. So then their investments made from North America here into in some non in some renewable projects that's going on in other parts of the world. So some utilities here are sort of looking at extending their portfolio into these developing areas because they understand what tourism is and so forth. So I think it's not going to be lost. But in the defense of this conversation, we only spoke about three things: green culture, and I have a slide, a PowerPoint slide I'll send that connects everything we talked about. So it's really green culture and technology. Everything that I work on comes from something green, something cultural, and something technology. And in every project, I try to weave the GCT because I don't want to be that person who's trying to pound. It may appear so that you pound 100 nails in a board and not do any one of them through. So my entire legacy is based on the GCT complex. So it's green culture and technology, and I look at ways in which safety, for example, in our green industry, a lot of it is cultural, and how can we use technology to be safer? So we can draw from the three realms that I work in, and that's kind of a lot of the brain thing that I work on is really cultural. Kind of it could distill into some cultural discussions.
when it's all said and done for you, right? What will your particular focus and a contribution have been in the green side of this business?
It has a lot to do at the end of the day with the nexus of energy, the needs for energy, the needs for human safety, and bring in an aesthetics. Obviously, we want that green space to promote a sense of well-being as well. So when we look at it from an ecosystem perspective, and we look at the green within the confines of ecosystems, the utility right away is an ecosystem. I talk about this on the talk circuit all the time. What we do under the wire influences the edge. And the edge trees, the stability of the edge trees come into play. Hence, you have tree biomechanics. What are we doing here? Our pruning practices on the edge trees. When we say we used to, we no longer say trim, we say prune. So that tells us that we are raising the bar on how we treat green. And in our space, in our right of way, and in our energy industry, we really want to reduce and mitigate against trees and green spaces being a conflict. It should be a complement to our energy needs. And that's the goal for me, really, is to find the sweet spot for our green space, whether it's trees or underwire biodiverse material that we want to keep in early succession, quite rightfully so, to be a nexus for us that is no longer a conflict, but it's managed to be a complement to our energy needs.
So on that specifically, is it a conflict because it is viewed as a negative impact on power delivery? So because it is the number one cause of outages in the country, the response is a aggressive one rather than one that says, "Hey, we can still achieve, um, stable power delivery while maintaining an eco-friendly community, biodiverse community." Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it is.
The work that I know Phil has championed in the Right of Way Stewardship Council and some of these initiatives, is that something you're involved with? Like, because that it feels to me like that is one of those things that I've learned about that would set, and there's only like call it not a handful, maybe 6, 7, 8 utilities, Phil, that have gone through that rigor.
8 or 9 now, I think, that are
But
certified,
but
accredited.
it sounds like the Right of Way Stewardship Council is one that emphasizes that level of right of way, you know, biodiversity as a key piece to the heartbeat of that initiative. Is that something that you feel is a good leverage, for your work and being able to kind of continue to have utilities buy into that?
Yes, I think it's a show. It showcases the need for it. How much of a leverage? One would hope that there is a leverage, but on the showcase front, it used to be if you were a good steward, that was good enough. But it goes beyond, a little bit now to the point of what are we doing with also an EROI? What is our ecological return on the investment? Because we have the monetary component as well. And being on the stewardship accreditation, that helps. It's an ROI, right? It shows that you've been able to achieve this much benefits, you know, um, with the money, with the investment, rather than not knowing, what you're doing, and all you can say, now you have metrics that guide you, and that helps. That helps.
Okay. And the C part of it, the culture, is something I guess we touched on, which is, digging into the why and helping people. It's just part of your adaptive approach. Not just hammering people with content, but making sure that they can connect dots so that when they're in a position to make a decision, they're making an informed decision, is really, I feel like, the heartbeat of your cultural contribution.
Yes, I think so. I think learning to, well, first of all, listen, um, and assimilate as many perspectives as you can. Um, helps helps the product at the end of the day. But certainly being able to infuse what's going to come after we talk today, into the process is where a certain amount of understanding that emerging perspectives or emerging nuances are important to incorporate into any decision you make today.
Well, Dr. Prasad, maybe you can tailor a manual for my 9 and 4-year-old son, and we can get them to listen more because I can't figure that out. So, no, this was a great chat. We could
You get
definitely
the
go
record
on.
for the longest.
Oh yeah,
We could just keep
you own that
going.
one. Yeah, we
Oh,
could keep going because you've done a lot, and it's interesting, it's fascinating, and I'd love to have you back on, and maybe take a piece of one of the conversations, maybe a complete focus on Trinidad Tobago, and maybe we can really do
that'd be
a
cool.
discussion just entirely on the Caribbean, the
Yeah.
culture, your home country, and some of the more, everybody who listens to this, a lot of our conversation is very U.S. centric, very North American centric. So I think it would be pretty fascinating to have an entire episode dedicated to Trinidad Tobago,
hmm
place that you came from, and some of those cultural
That'd be
nuances. I think
pretty.
it'd be pretty
great.
cool. We should do that.
I like
Yeah,
that.
I got a
We should do
lot of
that.
yeah, I got a lot of that. I get a lot of that from Europe. A lot of like when I spoke, I spoke at the ISA National in Sweden, in Malmö, Sweden, and at that I had Norwegian, Finland, and Swedish and French people were really intrigued and wanted to learn more about it. So I did a separate, as you said, I did a separate Caribbean talk for them, for the folks there, and they lapped it up because people in the developed world want to know that, hey, I could plant a tree somewhere else, so I can help in a land mitigation effort somewhere else. And besides, I don't see why my government does not give you all some money to do that as part of our, global remediation, because we have done what we could do here and we have filled the bucket. Well, why don't we give Belize some money? Let's give so Belize falls into the CARICOM plan really. And I've talked to the Minister of Growth at the Belize at Belmopan, Belize, and also trying to bring. So I'm actually bringing the two ministers together, one from Trinidad and Tobago and one from Belize. I'm trying to brand new both of them, so I'm trying to bring both of them together, have a conversation, and that's where the connector part I think plays a role, right, Tej? So
Yeah, no, agreed. So
so
let's
yeah.
we'll put it on the docket, and we'll get that going as well.
Yeah,
So
we
this
could
is
call
great.
one CARICOM Green, Pacific Islands Green. That would be cool. Asian, Southeast Asia.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. All right. We'll talk
Yep.
again.
That's it for this episode of the Trees and Lines podcast, brought to you by Iapetus Infrastructure Services. If you like the show, please give us a rating of 5 stars on Apple or Spotify. If you have any questions or comments on any of our episodes or ideas for topics or guests in the future, we'd love to hear from you. Please contact us at treesandlines@iapetusllc.com. We'll chat with you soon.